Hi Guava Bees, and welcome to another episode of the Dear Guava Bean podcast. Remember, submit your questions in the sandbox or on the website and we could be answering yours in the next episode. I'm Francesca and with me is Claire.
Hello.
And today's question is from Jessica, who asks, Dear Guava Bean, I really struggle to price my services. Clients never want exactly the same thing as each other, so I can't keep my package prices the same. On top of that, I am quite versatile and a keen learner, so I've been taking on more and more varied tasks, so I'm doing very diverse work sometimes for the same client. Plus, with being quite new to all of this, I find it difficult to estimate how long it will take me to do a task, which makes it even harder to quote a price. Do you have any advice? Okay, so as a lot of these questions that do come through in our episodes, I think this is another thing that a lot of freelancers will relate to, especially if you're just starting out. I think pricing can be quite difficult. Personally, for me, I've experimented with different kinds of pricing, from hourly rates to packages and lots of different things. My first thoughts on this question would be experience will tell you how long things take, also what works for you as well, and obviously depending on the clients you work for too. What's your experience with pricing, Claire?
I used to price by the hour, and nowadays I still mostly price by the hour. So I didn't really quote for packages. It sounds like she's quoting for a package, which makes it very tough because you have to think about everything and you're giving a fixed price. And if the client adds to work, if they add work on later, then that can get very tricky. And so I found it easiest to just price by the hour. But of course, at the beginning, I had no idea what to charge for an hour. So I just researched, I looked at what other people were charging. I went to research the very best because I was trying to be a virtual assistant. And so I looked online and I searched what other virtual assistants were charging. And I saw, okay, at the very top of the line, they're charging $35 an hour. And so I was like, okay, so I'm not there yet, but I can start at maybe 15 an hour or 20 an hour. And it's also a little bit of seeing what people agree to. Sometimes I put out a number that I want to be charged. And sometimes people just say, yeah, that's okay. Or they'll say, I was actually thinking of this much instead. And then we negotiate from there. So I think it's a matter of first doing your research and knowing how much the experts charge, and then knowing how much you want to get paid and being willing to negotiate, but starting with a higher rate. And that's always been my experience. Have you done packages?
I did very briefly. Actually, it was when I was trying to be a virtual assistant too. A lot of freelancers I speak to kind of start out testing the waters by, offering virtual assistant services. And that certainly was the case for me, particularly because I had quite a strong customer support background. So I sort of combined that with sort of admin and things like that, managing CRMs and things. So I actually tried packages and they were unsuccessful for me, unfortunately. I did a little research. Some virtual assistants at the time were offering hourly rates, some were packages, so it was just a case of experimenting for me. And I tried to offer packages that I felt my ideal clients would be looking for, but also that offered different services within the packages. And I even tried to do retainer packages too, so offering a certain amount of a service for a flat rate. As I say, unfortunately they were unsuccessful, and I don't know whether that's because maybe I needed to do more research myself, I'm not sure, or whether it was just I felt too restricted. And that might sound funny because a package can contain lots of different kinds of services. You can really package things however you want. But for me, it kind of felt like the only clients I could go after were ones that were interested in several of my services, so I could offer a package that would fit. But actually, the clients that I ended up working with may have started out with, okay, you can monitor my email inboxes, or you can chat to my customers via live chat, and then we would add services later on down the line. And I think that's kind of the route that I tended decided to go. So an hourly rate actually always worked best for me too in the end. I guess it does depend on the kind of work you do though. So for a virtual assistant, like we both have tried out, that would be like best at an hourly rate. You know, it depends on kind of the skills you're offering and things like that. But say if you're a designer or a writer, maybe an hourly rate isn't so good. A package might be better with that kind of thing. Or somebody who manages maybe social media accounts and wants to put out a certain amount of posts per month, that kind of thing. So it really does depend, to be honest. I don't really know what kind of work Jessica does, but again, that kind of diversifying your skills as well can mean that an hourly rate can be easier. Because obviously if you want to build on your skill set, then packages will constantly have to change, and then your clients are likely to change and that kind of thing too. Have you ever tried to do packages? Did they work for you?
I've never done packages, but I did do flat rates, and I still do flat rates for some projects now. I only did it when I had enough experience that I knew exactly how many hours it was going to take, and I knew that switching over to a flat rate was actually going to be more profitable for me, because at some point you get good at your work and you get faster at it, and the things that used to take me 20 hours maybe now only take me 10 hours, but I'm still doing the same amount of work and I don't want to lose that extra income. So that is when I decided to make the switch to charging a flat rate for, you know, just the service that I was giving. But I will say, like, I didn't do that until maybe like my third year in freelancing. The first 2 years I only charged by the hour because I just didn't know any other way to charge.
That makes sense. You know, like I think a really good important part that you've just touched upon is that as your experience goes up and your skills actually go up as well, and you're investing in your knowledge and the things that you can do, obviously your hourly rate then has to change. Because if you don't adjust your hourly rate depending on how experienced you are, you're then likely to actually earn less because you're taking less time. And if you're only charging an hourly rate, then the things that used to take you, you know, a long time and take you less time, well, you're charging less. And that doesn't seem fair, because I don't think a client should invest in what you are charging right now. They're investing in the years and years of experience, or the months of experience that you've been doing to build up your experience. So it's almost like, I think an hourly rate can work. I'd like the idea of a flat rate. I personally am very new to charging flat rates myself. That's not something that I've really invested in the past with my clients. I know Jessica says that she likes to build up different skills. Make sure that you keep looking back and that you keep adjusting your hourly rate to reflect that experience, because you don't want to be caught short with, you know, not earning as much as you're worth. You know, you've invested a lot of time in building your skills. You don't really want to be caught actually getting paid less and less as time goes on, because that can happen. And it can be a bit daunting, especially if you're working with a client on a long-term basis. I think it's well within your right to say, you know, maybe on a yearly basis or whatever works for you, to say that you will raise your rates as you need to make sure you can still cover your costs, to make sure that you're still getting paid what you deserve. And most of the time clients are fine with that. But just, I think it's important to remember what you're worth and not to kind of be worried about that and not wanting to raise your rates in fear of, you know, your clients being put off by it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. You should always charge what you feel you're worth. Even if you think clients might not be willing to pay that amount, you should still be ready to charge and ask for that amount and just see, because sometimes they actually appreciate and they respect you more for charging a good rate, because they know that if you're happy with the pay that you're getting, you're going to be a good employee for them. And so they want that trade-off. And so you should definitely not be afraid to charge what you're worth or to increase your rates. For me, I was always super scared to increase my hourly rates. And so I think I only had a conversation once. It was very nerve-wracking trying to ask for a raise. But like you said, like employers, they definitely understand that you're increasing your skills, you have a lot more experience, you have more to offer, and obviously you want to get paid appropriately for that. And so I would suggest to Jessica that if you're really struggling to quote for all the different tasks that you're doing, then maybe switch over to an hourly strategy and just have that conversation and say, hey, I think this could be really good for you. You know, you're only paying for the hours that I actually work. So some months you might pay less and some months you might pay more if we have more work. But that way it's very fair to both people. And I think if you let them see it from that point of view and you position it in a way that it sounds and it is an advantage to them that you're charging hourly, then I think that gives you a lot more flexibility. You can add on more tasks without feeling like you're doing like too much diverse work in one package. Do you still quote hourly, or have you switched over? Have you tried packages again?
No, I think it depends really, because I guess I do lots of different kinds of work. So for me, because I write a lot of content, for example, or even create videos and things like that, these things tend to be like project-based rates rather than hourly, because sometimes I think it can be too difficult to charge hourly, especially with something like writing. I think because the client should be paying for like an end product rather than my process. That depends on what it's about, whether I need to do extra research, different numbers of drafts, sourcing images. It can be lots of different things. So I'll usually factor those things into a project rate. It's only fair to the client that they should pay for the end amount, but obviously I do factor in how much extra work there is. It's with writing, for example, it's not just putting words on a page. There's a lot of other work you have to do too. So yeah, that thing tends to be sort of project based. But then if it's things like community management, or customer support or something like that, that tends to be hourly, because you're almost working in real time, if that makes sense. So the work you're doing is based on a certain time frame where it has to be completed. So, for example, I used to do a customer support for a client, and I would be literally live, ready for customers to contact me between the hours of like 10 a.m. and 8 p.m., for example. So I would charge that whole time, but it would be an hourly rate. I think it's probably worth mentioning as well that if you work for a client that has seasonal work, that can also be a good reason to have an hourly rate as opposed to a project rate, because the amount of work you do can vary a lot. So it fluctuates. For example, I've worked with a company who sell like workout gear, and they're super popular in sort of Halloween, Christmas time, and they're not so popular in spring. So it seems fair that I would charge hourly, because I'm then getting paid for the amount of work I have to do. And it's also fair on the client too. They don't want to be paying for me to just sit there if there's no work to do. It doesn't seem fair. So obviously if it's more consistent, then perhaps a flat rate would be better. But obviously if it varies quite a lot or is quite volatile, then I think an hourly rate works better. So Claire, I'm curious, how have you figured out your hourly rate in the past? Because I've tried a couple of things, and I think it does vary depending on, what kind of work you do. I think it varies freelancer to freelancer. What I mean by this, let me give an example of what I mean. So I charge an hourly rate, but the way I've worked out my hourly rate is a combination of researching similar freelancers in my niche, but also working out how much I would actually like to earn, say in a month, then figuring out how much I would like to work, and then from there figuring out what my hourly rate would be. So I personally wouldn't necessarily charge per hour using this formula. Sometimes I do, but if it's something like writing work, I can still use that hourly rate and also figure out how long it can take for a project from start to finish to complete. And then I can base my project price on that. Have you done something similar, Claire, or what is your process?
Yeah, there's actually a formula that you can use, and I put it in the Freelancer Starter course on how to find your hourly rate based on what you want to earn every month and how many hours you want to work every day. And so if you know what you want to earn every month and you know how many hours you are willing to work every day, you can do a little bit of math and figure out what your hourly rate should be. I did not realize that until much, much later, though. When I started out, I did very similar to you. I researched online, I Googled, I figured out what other people were earning in this service, and then I tried to quote what I felt comfortable with, what I felt would be a good, a reasonable rate for my time and my experience. And because I know myself, I'm going to put a lot of effort into it. I also want to factor that in. Like if I don't get paid what I consider, to be enough, I'm probably not going to put 100% effort in. And so I was always kind of willing to quote higher, and hopefully like the client would say yes to that, and then we would work together, or they would negotiate and we would meet somewhere in the middle. But for me, I always felt like I always wanted to put out the amount that I really wanted to earn, and then I would be willing to negotiate if needed. And sometimes I had to, but sometimes the client was just happy to take that and I didn't even have to negotiate. And so a lot of times it's just kind of knowing what other people charge and then knowing what you're worth and what you want to charge. But like you said, it's different from person to person. Everybody's going to have a different way of doing it. And it's one of these things that you kind of just have to experience and go through and, figure out what's comfortable for you.
I agree. I think another thing to point out as well, and there's a slight kind of downside in doing some research on other freelancers. Well, there's a couple of things. One, other freelancers may be in the same niche, but they may not have the same skill level or experience. So it can be difficult to kind of judge whether that's a good hourly rate for you or not. It can give you a rough idea, definitely. But, everybody's got a unique set of skills that you have to factor in when you're thinking of your hourly rate. But also that some freelancers may race to the bottom with their hourly rate and actually charge less than what they're worth. And that's really sad. I don't think anyone should really ever have to do that. Even if you're a new freelancer, you're worth probably more than you think you're worth. But if you're comparing yourself to people like that, especially sometimes I find on platforms, like bidding platforms, the prices tend to skew on the lower side. So if you're using these to compare yourself and try and think of an hourly rate, it's probably going to be a bit lower than what you're worth again. And like you said, you're probably going to regret that and begrudge doing the work if you're not getting paid enough. You don't want to feel like at the end of the week when you're getting your, you're sent off your invoice or you're getting paid and you're like, well, is that it? I felt like I did a lot of work and I've invested a lot of time refining my skills and I'm not getting enough. And, it's going to make you not enjoy your work as much, like you said. So those are two really important things to factor in. I think that it can definitely be a good rough guide, but just to remember, obviously, is obviously only some work is actually billable. So your client work is billable, but the other admin stuff you have to do behind the scenes is not. So I would try and also factor in how much time you spend doing other admin stuff as well, just to make sure that you're covering your costs. You're paying your bills, you're making enough money to live and have extra and that kind of thing too. So it's a lot of things that go into figuring out your hourly rate, and comparing yourself to other freelancers should only be one aspect of that.
Those are very good points to mention. So basically, every freelancer has two options. It's either an hourly rate or it's a flat rate. And you can do that as just like a monthly flat rate, or you can do a package. But those are pretty much your two options. And it sounds like if packages aren't working out for you, then you should try hourly rates. And if hourly rates aren't working out for you, then maybe you should try packages and flat rates. But you always have options. And I think if you're struggling, like if Jessica is really struggling at this point, my advice would be to try something new. Try going with an hourly rate, quote what you think you would want to get paid for all of these various tasks that you're going to be doing, and then see if the client will accept it. I think you'll actually have a lot more success quoting hourly. And there's always a downside to it. The downside is that you don't know exactly how much you're going to get paid every month. If you're on a flat rate and you're making, let's say, $500 a month, you can count on that money always coming in. But if you're hourly, some months it might be good, some months it might be bad. And so that's the downside of quoting hourly. But the upside is that you have a lot more control over your fees, actually. Like if you wanted to take on more work, you could find opportunities, you could suggest new tasks, you could be active and add value to clients and actively grow your income. Whereas if you put yourself in a fixed rate box or a fixed package, then every time you want to add on to that, it's a whole new conversation. That's what I like to avoid.
Definitely. I think another thing as well, another way to look at it would be if you're creating a package, but you're not yet sure how much work it's going to involve or how much time it's really going to take you, especially with a new skill that you've learned, you might find that actually a package, although potentially if you have a client that's willing to pay that every month and you have that money to count on, what's going to happen if that takes you way longer than you expected and you've already agreed it with the client, and actually you're probably making less money than you would be if you were to charge hourly. So that can be a bit of a risk with packages. And like we've both said, Claire, we have chopped and changed the way we've done things until it works, and there is no shame in doing that. I think that's part of the process in being a freelancer, because everyone is different. There isn't a one formula that fits everybody. It's figuring out what works. And I think, like you said, I think, Jessica, if you're worried about it, try something new. If you found that it's a bit of a struggle and you're worried about it at the moment, there's nothing to say that by changing it, that's the way you have to keep it for the rest of your career. Of course not. We can change things however we like. So yeah, I think maybe an hourly rate would work if you're not sure, and that will give you the experience definitely to understand how long things take. As you add to your skill set, you can kind of factor in maybe improving your hourly rate along the line, or creating packages if that works for you. It's really just experimenting and seeing what works.
I found that both work if done properly. Flat rates work well if you're really good at your job, but you don't want to get paid by the hour to do it. Like you said, project-based work. But hourly works really well if you don't know how many hours it's going to take you and you want to make sure you're compensated for your time. So I quote both in the same invoice. I'll bill some for hourly and I'll bill some at a flat rate. But, obviously I have that conversation with the client first and we know what the structure will be. But I bill hourly when it suits me better, and I bill flat rate when it suits me better too. I think every freelancer should have that mindset. You're always just looking for what's best for you, like what's fair for the client, but what's also fair for you. And it might be packages or it might be hourly. You got to be flexible and be willing to go both ways and find something that works.
Very good points. Yeah, I think in the nature of freelancing is that we're flexible and that we can change our skills. And I think it's awesome. If Jessica wants to add to her skill set and just do lots of different diverse kinds of work, why shouldn't she be able to do hourly and project? I think that's amazing. So yeah, I would encourage anybody who's looking to do the same thing to never be put off by the fact that you have lots of different things to offer a client. It's a bonus. It's a benefit. Clients love working with people with lots of different skills. And, if, like you said, Claire, if you need to do both, if you need to charge some of the work hourly because it varies every month, and then you're doing something else which is going to be the same every month, and you want to charge like a package or a flat rate, then that's cool. It's just about building a relationship with these clients and, figuring out if you need to change things later down the line. It's figuring out what works and what doesn't, really. One of the main parts and the main skills of being a freelancer is to recognize when that's happening and use that knowledge, use what you learn from these experiences to further strengthen, the way you work with clients. I think it's as simple as that. We hope this episode has helped you figure out what to do next. Now it's your turn, Guava Bees. Have you got a burning question that only Guava Bean can help answer? Submit your question in the sandbox or on the website, and we could be answering yours in the next episode. That's all from us. To all creatives, rebels, and digital nomads, keep working online and living free.
Want to know more about the Freelancer Sandbox? Visit guavabean.com/sandbox to start your free trial now.